Footy Prime has dropped some massive news around the CanMNT managerial role, and it was around the likes of two American-based managers in Jesse Marsch and Greg Vanney. That is right, Greg Vanney, who we will be breaking down in this video, as apparently according to Footy Prime, Greg Vanney is held in high regard by the CSA, which I find shocking and very interesting as an American-based manager who has solely based his time in the MLS, as Greg Vanney has of course spent time with Toronto FC, managing 250 matches with 1.54 points per match, and time now with LA Galaxy, where he currently manages and has managed 124 matches, putting up 1.40 points per game. And this is very interesting. A manager who has solely managed his time in the MLS in his managerial career, not based himself anywhere else in Europe or branching out to any of the bigger leagues, is held in high regard by the CSA, and I find that very puzzling for so many reasons. Greg Vanney is someone who hasn't really managed the top players or any top clubs, and when you look at some of the other managers who have been rumored, I very much would prefer them, even Jesse Marsch, who is also American-based, and I did make a video breaking down the CSA, interviewing him and talking to him yesterday in New York. But for me, Greg Vanney doesn't size up to any of the other managers who have been rumored, who have been on the short list, or even approached to be interviewed, and some of them even rejecting it. Looking at Frank Lampard, the likes of Hervé Renard, and Jose Mourinho have all rejected an interview with Canada to be the next CanMNT manager, and they're miles above the quality of Greg Vanney, and this is no fault to his own. He is a very good manager in the MLS, just someone who I believe shouldn't be taking this Canadian side to probably the most important part of this program's history. But looking at the other managers who are on the short list, who have been rumored, who have been talked to have interviews, the likes of Jesse Marsch, who I very much like, the likes of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and even Paul Clement today has come out as a manager in the race for the CanMNT role. And for me, Greg Vanney doesn't size up to Jesse Marsch, Ole, or Paul Clement anywhere near. From the size of clubs they've managed, from where they've managed them in the top leagues, or even the players they've been to manage. That has been a huge talking point among Canadian supporters, is getting a manager who can manage these bigger players and these bigger profiles on this Canadian side, and a manager willing to make this really a project side, because this Canadian side is a project. You have the Copa America coming up this summer, which is arguably one of the biggest international football tournaments outside of the World Cup, and then you have the likes of the World Cup in 2026, which is all important for this program and leading up for this Canadian side. So for me, looking at what Greg Vanney can bring this side, I don't think it's sizable to what Jesse Marsch, Paul Clement, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer bring. Solely, like I talk about, the players. This side has a lot of big-time players and where they've played and who they've been managed by. Alistair Johnston's been managed by Ange Postecoglou. You've had Alphonso Davies managed by Tommy Tuchel. You have the likes of even Fonseca managing Jonathan David. There's been some top quality players that we have on this national team who are managed by some of the best, and even Tajon Buchanan and Simone Inzaghi. This is a great side who have been managed by some of the best managers in the world. And yes, you can say Jesse Marsch and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and the likes of Paul Clement are nowhere near those managers. And fair play, they aren't. But this Canadian side is not going to get a massive name. They're not going to get a Zinedine Zidane. They're not going to get a super Tommy Tuchel. They're not going to get one of those names. But they can definitely push for names that have managed some of the top clubs, who have managed some of the top players. And that is crucially what Kevin Blue is doing right now. And he is doing a fantastic job. And for me, you just got to look at where Greg Vanney's managed. He hasn't managed any top players, and he hasn't managed any top clubs. And yes, looking at the side and looking at what Canadian supporters are looking at, we need a manager who can say and build the confidence of our players, and they can look up to on a weekly basis in big tournaments and say, we're going to put ourselves on the line for our manager, and we're going to do everything he asks, and we're not going to down tools. I'm not saying any of those players would, but we need a manager that these players can look up to, and we're going to say, we're going to do everything we can to impress this manager and to do everything we can in our power to get over the line to win games for this manager. And I think they do that for Jesse Marsch, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who's a legend in football, and even Paul Clement. For me, Greg Vanney would not scream out to that. He hasn't managed any top players. Like I remind you, he's been with LA Galaxy, he's been with Toronto FC. Some of the biggest players he's managed: Jonathan Osorio, Ricky Puig, Joseph Panstel. Those aren't anywhere near the players Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or even the likes of Jesse Marsch have managed. Some of the players Marsch has managed: Erling Haaland, Josko Gvardiol, the likes of Szoboszlai, the likes of Benjamin Sesko, Calvin Phillips, Rafinha for Ole, Rashford, and so on. There are top players, and these are managers who have managed in the Premier League. Arguably one of the biggest leagues in the world, and definitely the biggest commercially branded league in the world. And that comes with a lot of weight in their shoulders. So I believe Greg Vanney just isn't ready to take over this Canadian manager role. And I don't think it's any fault of his own. I think he's a very good MLS manager, doing very well with LA Galaxy, did extremely well with Toronto FC for most of his time in Canada on the East Coast. But I just don't think he has what it takes for the CanMNT managerial role. Some of those names are so much better than Greg Vanney. He doesn't size up to some of the managers who I've talked about. Even some of the managers that Kevin Blue has gone for and been rejected by. You can see the certain path Kevin Blue is going for. You can see the clear tactics and the way he's going to try targeting managers. He's looking at managers with so much pedigree, so much history, and he's trying to take this program in a new direction and trying to give it to someone who can take this program in the right path. And Greg Vanney, for me, just isn't the guy that we should hold in high regards, and someone that we shouldn't even be talking about for this CanMNT managerial role. So let me know what you guys think down below. Is Greg Vanney someone you guys would consider? Is he up there with a Jesse Marsch for you guys? Should he be up there with an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Paul Clement? Let me know down below in the comments. Make sure to drop a like and hit that sub button, and we'll be back for many more because this channel is just on the rise.